helping people cope with and overcome life's challenges. This is Life Transformation with Michael Hart, award-winning psychotherapist, author, and Canadian certified counselor.
Welcome to another episode of the Life Transformation Show. We're addressing a painful but important topic today: navigating parental alienation. So many parents suffer in silence as they watch their children being turned against them due to manipulation and deceit. The emotional and psychological wounds from this form of family and estrangement can last a lifetime. The Bible reminds us in Malachi 4, verse 6, He will turn the hearts of the parents to their children, and the hearts of the children to their parents. This verse speaks to God's desire for reconciliation and healing in broken family relationships. So, parental alienation is a direct violation of this divine design. But there is hope for restoration. So if you're new to our ministry at Elim Counselling Services and the Life Transformation Show, you can find out more about us at elimcounselingministry.com. You can also make a tax receiptable donation to elimmentalhealthfoundation.com. We have many resources on our YouTube channel and in Michael Hart's book, The Transformed Life, which can be found on Amazon. So to help us unpack this issue, we have Michael Hart, an expert psychotherapist and author, who will be offering both psychological insights and biblical wisdom on the subject today. Michael, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Denise. This is an incredibly relevant topic, and I am so glad to be here so we can discuss this topic. And I think many of our listeners who are going through parental alienation or have been the subject of parental alienation, or children who are now adults who have been through parental alienation, they're going to find this show extremely valuable.
So, Michael, parental alienation is a heartbreaking reality for many families. So for our listeners who may have not heard of this before, can you explain what is parental alienation?
Absolutely. Parental alienation, simply put, occurs when one parent systematically manipulates a child to reject, fear, or resent the other parent. Often they will use falsehoods, exaggerated claims, or sometimes it's just subtle psychological conditioning. And this is sometimes motivated by bitterness following divorce, control issues, or even unresolved trauma in the alienating parent. The psychological effects are significant and well documented in psychological literature. According to Dr. Richard Gardner, who first coined the term parental alienation syndrome, or PAS, children exposed to alienation often develop pathological loyalty to the alienating parent.
So you use this word, pathological loyalty. Can you elaborate on what you mean by that, and how does it affect children caught in parental alienation?
Yes, so pathological loyalty refers to an excessive compulsive allegiance that a child develops towards the alienating parent at the expense of their relationship with the targeted or alienated parent. So this is not a natural preference, but rather it's a psychological conditioned response that results from manipulation, coercion, and emotional dependency.
So, Michael, tell us more about some of the strategies that alienating parents use to develop this pathological loyalty?
That's such a good question. And it's very interesting. But pathological loyalty develops mainly as a result of 4 factors. And the first factor is called guilt induction, where the child is made to feel that any desire or motivation that they have to see or love the alienated parent is a betrayal to the other parent. And then the second factor is emotional dependence. The child, as a result of the alienation, becomes responsible for the emotional well-being of the alienating parent, who often make themselves into a victim and makes the child feel responsible for their well-being. So they may say things like, "You're the only one who understands me," or "I don't know what my life would be without you." And so this dependency creates a bond between the alienating parent and the child involved. And then the third factor is a distorted narrative. This is where the alienating parent rewrites family history, convincing the children that the targeted parents was absent or unloving, or sometimes even branded as dangerous. And so these children grows up in this false narrative where they think that the parent who is being alienated is dangerous without any rational ground or any reason that's based and rooted in reality. And then the fourth way that pathological loyalty develops is through conditional love. The child learns that affection and approval are tied to their rejection of the other parent. And so any attempt or conversation that would cause the child, where the child would see the other parent in a positive light, is shut down or frowned upon, or the love of the alienating parent is withdrawn. So over time, the children are conditioned to know that the only way they can receive love from the parent who is alienating the other parent is to shun and reject the alienated parent. Dr. Amy Baker, leading researcher in parental alienation, states that children under pathological loyalty feel immense psychological distress because their sense of identity becomes enmeshed with the alienating parent's need. And so over time, these children internalize the falsehoods about the other parent, and they begin to genuinely believe that rejecting them is the right and necessary thing to do.
So, Michael, that's very informative, but really sad for especially the child. So what is the impact on the parent who is alienated?
So we can well imagine that for the parent who is being alienated from their children, who can see their children and are being blocked from seeing their children, that the impact would be very devastating. These parents who are being alienated often suffer from intense grief, as if they're mourning the death of someone, because it's like a death. It's like the children no longer exist in their world. And so this often leads to other mental health issues like depression, anxiety, a sense of helplessness and hopelessness. And sadly enough, some of these parents over a long term will have PTSD-like symptoms due to the forced loss of a loving relationship with their children. Psychologists describe this as a form of ambiguous loss, where the parent is emotionally bereaved of the child, even though the child is still alive. So this is a very significant and serious blow to the parent who is being alienated.
Again, heartbreaking, Michael. And from a biblical perspective, how does this kind of family division contradict God's design for parent-child relationships?
That's a great question, Denise, because our listeners would know that we like to get a biblical perspective of all the topics that we do. So let me draw from Ephesians 6, verse 1 to 4, where it states that children should obey their parents in the Lord, for this is right. But then it goes on to say, honor your father and your mother, which is the first commandment with a promise that it may go well with you and that you may enjoy long life on the earth. This verse clearly shows that God's design is for children to honor both parents, not to be manipulated into choosing one over the other. So what parental alienation does is that it dishonors one of the parent, and this is against God's will. But then the children are also put in a situation where they are affected, because notice this verse as a promise as well, that it may go well with you. So children are to obey their parents that it may go well with you. So when a child is turned against a parent to disrespect and dishonor the parent, it is actually affecting the child in a negative way. Similarly, Malachi chapter 4 verse 6 proclaims that God, and I think Denise, you mentioned to this verse in the beginning of the show, Malachi 4:6 says, he will turn the hearts of the parents to their children and the hearts of the children to their parents. So this verse reflects God's heart for parents and children to be in a close relationship together, emphasizing that familial love should be restored and not destroyed. When a parent deliberately alienates their child, they violate this divine principle and contribute to division instead of unity.
So that's such an important biblical foundation. It's clear that both psychology and scripture affirm that parental alienation is deeply damaging. So many alienated children are manipulated to view the targeted parent as harmful or unworthy of love. Proverbs 6, verse 16 to 19 warns against that, though. It says, those who stir up dissension among brothers. What are some common tactics used to alienate a child, and how do these tactics impact the child's emotional and psychological well-being?
That's a very interesting question, and you know, again, the biblical perspective is so important to everything that we do on this show. Proverbs 6 verse 16 to 19 actually expanded from a little bit from what you said, Denise, list the things that God hates, and among them is one who sows discord, as you said, dissension among brothers. So this applies directly to parental alienation, because alienating parent is deliberately planting seeds of division. So I like the fact that you brought up that question in your that scripture in your question. But some of the common tactics of alienation include bad-mouthing the other parent. To be more specific, bad-mouthing the other parent. The alienating parent constantly speaks negatively about the other parent, portraying them as unloving, uncaring, volatile, or dangerous. And secondly, limiting or blocking the contact. The child is subtly or overtly prevented from seeing the alienated parent, often through excuses, scheduling conflicts, or even legal battles that are drawn on for long periods of time, sometimes deliberately, until the child is old enough to refuse to see the other parent, the alienated parent, because their mind by that time is so turned against the other parent. And there's also false allegations. The alienating parent may falsely accuse the other parents of abuse, neglect, or abandonment to create the fear and distrust. And we also see that in many cases, the alienating parent often encourage the child to reject and disrespect the alienated parent by rewarding them when they behave badly or refuse to see the other parent. And so, or withdrawing their love, as we said before, when they indicate any interest in seeing the parent who is being alienated.
So that's really incredible damaging for the child, to condition the child to reject a loving parent based on lies and manipulation. What does research say about the long-term effects of this manipulation on children?
I love so much to go there, because this is very important for parents who are listening. If you're engaging in parental alienation, you should pay specific attention to this part. Research confirms that children who are exposed to parental alienation, that these children develop low self-esteem, chronic anxiety, depression, and difficulty forming trusting relationship later on in life. So in adulthood, many of them struggle with identity confusion. They don't know who they are because of the way their world has been turned upside down. And many of these children feel guilt at some level over rejecting the alienated parent, and may even, when they grow up, they repeat the same cycle of parental alienation in their own relationships. So from a biblical perspective, this directly contradicts what the Bible talks about, for example, in Colossians 3:21, where it warns, Father, to not embitter your children, or they will become discouraged. So alienation embitters children by placing them in the middle of adult conflicts, discouraging their emotional and spiritual well-being. And this is really a very damaging thing, as we have said, as we have outlined in this section.
Powerful point, Michael. It's clear that parental alienation doesn't just affect the present, but can shape a child's entire future. So, let's talk about how some children only realize in their teenage years or even in adulthood that they are deceived about the alienated parent throughout their childhood. So John 8:32, it tells us, "Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." So what kind of psychological and spiritual impact does this sudden realization have on them? And how can they begin to process this truth?
That's such an excellent question, Denise. When a child, whether in adolescence or adulthood, discovers that they were misled about their alienated parent, the psychological and emotional impact can be profound and unsettling. So on top of the damaging impact of the alienation itself, when they realize that they have been deceived and lied to, there are further emotional harm that the children suffer. So from a psychological standpoint, this realization is often met with a sense of betrayal. The child may think, how could the parent I trusted lie to me? What else from my childhood wasn't true? Have I wasted years, rejected the loving parent? And so they go through a sense, when they realize that they have been lied to, they go through a period of grief, and mourning the loss of relationship and the years that they have missed out on developing a relationship with a parent who is alive and wanted to have a relationship with them. Many of these children, they suffer from guilt and regret. And they develop trust issues in relationships later on because they don't know how to trust someone else. If someone who they believed loved and cared for them deceived them all their lives, they have a hard time trusting in adult relationship.
Michael will be right back. You have been listening to the Life Transformation Show, where award-winning psychotherapist and author Michael Hart of Elim Counselling Services has been using several scriptures to speak on the topic, navigating parental alienation. You can find out more about us at elimcounselingministry.com or by calling 613-699-1677 or 1-877-204-2914. Please consider making a tax-receivable donation to this Christ-centered ministry. Your donations can be made through elimmentalhealthfoundation.com. Your donations help us to stay on the air and to provide subsidized counseling to those who can't afford it. Back to Michael.
From a spiritual perspective, this moment of realization is similar to what happened in the story of the prodigal son in Luke 15. He was deceived by the enemy of his soul into believing that his father's love was not enough, that he had to go out and be engaged in riotous living, as the King James Version said. But when he came to his senses, he realized that the father had been waiting for him all along. And many of these children, when they come out of parental alienation and realize that they have been lied to, they realize that there is a loving parent on the other end. So the Bible says in John 8:32, as you have said before, Denise, that then you will know the truth and the truth will set you free. However, truth can be painful because before it becomes freeing. So these children must allow themselves to grieve, seek wise counsel, and most importantly, move to healing so that they can form a healthy relationship with the other parent.
That's such a great connection you made with the prodigal son, Michael. I would imagine that not all of these children are able to accept the truth if they have been brainwashed their entire life to believe the other parent is evil. So, can you talk about what these children who are having a hard time to accept reality may be going through?
Another great question. And I think one of the most common thing that these children suffer from is denial. Initially, some of these children, even when they are faced with the truth and the other parent who has been alienated shows them written documents that they have been trying to reach out to them for years, or that things that they believe to be true is false or are false, these children go into denial. They refuse to accept and admit that they were deceived. Dr. Stephen Miller, a specialist in trauma psychology, describes denial as a psychological defense mechanism that protects the mind from unbearable truth. So many alienated children have spent years believing that one parent was dangerous or unloving or uncaring. So when they are confronted with the evidence contrary to their mindset, they refuse to accept this. And so another common response is anger. Once they do accept that they have been lied to and that the alienating parent have stolen years from their lives where they could have a relationship with the other parent, this anger can be directed inward. How could I have believed these lies? So these children may develop a self-hatred, or it could be directed outward. How could my parent have done this to me? And so they may express anger to the parent who alienated them. Research by Dr. Craig Childress, a clinical psychologist specializing in parental alienation, shows that anger is one of the most difficult emotions for alienated children to navigate. Many hold on to it for years, unable to let go of the anger. Some of these children suffer from confusion as well. They're confused. They don't know what to believe because their world has been turned upside down.
That's such a profound insight, Michael. You know, my heart breaks for these children who have to go through this emotional upheaval in their lives. And these children are caught in parental alienation, often grow up with distorted views of one parent and unresolved emotional wounds. You know, Proverbs 22 verse 6, it encourages parents to train up a child in the way he should go. And when he is old, he will not depart from it. So what does research say about the long-term effects of parental alienation, and how can we help these children heal even as adults?
That's such a good question, because we often talk think of training children that, you know, you sit the child down and you tell the child what is right or wrong. But training is also how the children observe what we do, how we live our lives. So as I said before, one of the things that children who are being alienated from another parent learn is that it's not important to have two parents in a family. So many of these children go on to have broken relationships, or they alienate their partner from their children, and so they repeat the cycle. So we also see that these children, that one of the long-term effects of these children is identity confusion. Alienated children grow up with this distorted reality of who they really are, because they don't know who they are. They become lost because they are not sure of their identity because of the lies and the distortion and the falsehoods that they have been taught all their lives. So as adults, they often question their own past and do not have a sense of history about their life. Low self-esteem is another common long-term effect. Children who are manipulated develop issues with self-esteem, but they have attachment injuries because of their alienation, where they are not able to form healthy relationship in adult life. And as we said before, they're at a higher risk for depression and anxiety.
So, Michael, we've covered some critical truths today, and I know many of our listeners may be experiencing the pain of parental alienation firsthand. So thank you for sharing your insights and biblical wisdom. And tune in next week when we will be doing part 2, Parental Alienation, Journey to Healing, Forgiveness, and Reconciliation. You can find this and past episodes on Elim Counseling Services YouTube channel. You can find out more about us at elimcounselingministry.com. Please consider making a tax receiptable donation through elimmentalhealthfoundation.com. Your contribution will directly help those seeking support and guidance. Until next time, this is your co-host, Denise Hart.
And Michael Hart, praying together that God would bless you in all your relationships and keep you sound in mind and pure in heart.